Can we hear it one more time for Poogie Bell? I was reading the newspaper the other day, after we did a concert the next day. There was a review in the paper, and the review said about Poogie, he sounds like a cross between Billy Cobham and Ginger Baker. So from now on, man, you gotta play only Ginger Baker licks. So I'm not sure whether this is supposed to be like, whether we're supposed to play or whether we're supposed to like do a clinic. So why not stop right now and see if anybody has any questions? No questions. Okay, so we're gonna play. No, I'm serious. Anybody have anything they want to ask? Any of us? We'd be more than happy to answer.
You from Southern California now?
Yeah.
So are you Lakers fan now?
No doubt, man. I'm from New York, but I had to step off of the Knicks about 13 years ago, man. Because they kept taking you, right there and then dropping you, Bernard King, Patrick Ewing. Okay, any music questions?
What do you think?
I'm sorry?
Oh, sorry.
I have pretty good pitch, but I was working with Take 6, and I'm starting to get a little insecure about my pitch now. Everybody say hi to Dave Thomas, number 9 from Take 6. But seriously, my pitch is pretty good. I've hung with people whose pitch is so perfect that they can't transpose. I know people who, like there was a great piano player, Richard T., God bless his soul. He's a great piano player, a studio musician, worked with everybody in New York when I was living in New York. And his pitch was so perfect that he couldn't look at a C and play a D. So we'd be doing sessions for singers like Roberta Flack. She'd say, this song is too high, can we lower it? And so, bass players, he said, no problem. That's how you transpose. But Richard T., he said, wait, man, I got to write it out. And I said, man, you can't transpose? He said, I can, but it's so uncomfortable to look at a note and play another note that I'd rather just take the time to write it out. So some people's pitch, they're so tuned into the scale, to the Western scale, that it almost limits them. So I have great relative pitch, meaning if you give me one note or somebody plays something, I know exactly what they're playing. And I think that's what's really important, and that's what's really valuable for musicians, is to have great relative pitch. Don't be fooled by those commercials on the back of the magazines, Perfect pitch is not going to make you a better musician. Relative pitch is what you need. And all the great musicians that you admire, they have great relative pitch. So what do you think are the three most important things to practice? You're a bass player. 3 most important things to practice. Man, I don't know. I never thought about it in terms of 3, but I know one thing is timing. So you have to get a metronome or a drum machine or whatever it is that you have, and figure out how to play everything that you want to play without speeding up or slowing down. Not that you're not going to speed up or slow down, because when you're playing with natural music, that happens. But you want to be able to control that, and you want to be able to, if you're doing any pop situations where there are machines involved, you don't want to all of a sudden be limited, because every time you get to your favorite lick, you speed it up and you leave the drum machines behind. So I think it's a good discipline to have, and it's an old discipline. I mean, everybody's had to practice with metronomes, I was doing a lot of studio work in the 80s, and you know what that music sounded like. It was all machines, everything was, and the people who did well were the people who could play with machines and click tracks, but make it sound like they weren't playing with machines and click tracks, make it sound natural. And that's pretty tricky, because what's natural is to speed up when you get excited and to slow down when you calm down. So I would say practice with a metronome, but don't end there. You've got to learn how to play perfectly, and then you got to figure out how to just not lock in there, because the worst thing to do is play with studio cats live, because they never speed up. You know what I mean? The thing's getting hot, man, everybody's trying to move forward, and we're starting to lean this way. And the drummer's like, no, man, that's not perfect, man. And you're going, no, we're past perfect, man. We're trying to get the fever up in here, you know? So learn how to play perfectly, but don't get caught up in that. Learn how to play, you know, from your heart also. So that's one thing, timing. For a bass player, also, your tone. I think a lot of bass players go past tone to amps and gear and strings and all that stuff. And I think that the most important thing is to learn how to really get the meat out of a note. I remember I was playing at a club in New York with Lenny White and Bernard Wright, two of my buddies. And Jocko used to always show up at the gig, you know, and sit in. But he basically would take over. We used on a couple of those gigs. He'd just come and turn the amp up to 10 or 11 or whatever the highest number was, and play Purple Haze or play, what's that? Star Spangled Banner, exactly. So anyway, between the sets, one time he said to me, man, do you know about cutting the string? And I said, you know, I didn't know what he was talking about. And that's all he said, you know, because he was kind of out at the time. You know? So, but you know, even when he was out, he said stuff you just had to decipher. And what I realized he meant was that I was doing a lot of slurring. And I was doing a lot of kind of ghost notes. And Jocko's whole thing was about really defining each note. It was always and he was basically telling me, look, you need to get that together. You know what I mean? But he didn't want to get into like an insult thing. So he just asked me if I knew about it, which I thought was really cool, you know. But what I'm getting to is getting a tone out of your bass is really important. Clear, good tone. Regardless of what the amps are, regardless of what the strings are, just really starting the note and ending the note. You know, because the end is as important as the start. And a lot of guys, you know, you'll hear scuzzy stuff at the end of the note, you know what I mean? And it's really, you gotta end it. And one of the greatest things for me was playing with Roberta Flack, because all she did was ballads. And, you know, lots of times you had one note to play every 3 bars, you know, boom. But you really began to learn how important those notes were, especially when you saw people in the audience crying about what she was singing, you know what I mean? And I really started to learn the value of those notes. And Luther Vandross was singing background at the time, and he was learning too. Or maybe he already knew, but whatever it was reinforced, because the value of notes and your tone is so important. And all the guys that you admire have tones that you really recognize right away. You know, 3 or 4 notes, you go, oh, that's my man, that's the song. You know? So tone, I think, is important. And then the third thing would be whichever direction you want to go. If you're going to be like a rhythm guy, then work on some creative bass lines. If you're going to be like a solo guy, then you got to learn all the solos from all the great jazz guys and figure out your voice within all of them, you know. Because after you get your time and your tone together, then it's kind of your choice of the path you want to take, you know.
That intro groove on Power, when you're raking back, is that one finger? Is that a trade secret?
Trade secret? No, all it is like using your thumb like a pick.
Oh, okay.
It's not that deep, you know what I mean? But it is one finger up and down. Trade secret. Intro? You gotta sing it, man. No, it's the intro? Yeah. The name of the song was intro.
Yeah. I think there's like a lot of oh, damn. That was like in Japan, I think you were it's like bomb.
The reason you threw me up is there's no double. It's all just.
Watch it, do it like 3 times.
She has a CD right there. I'll have to learn it during the break.
Great, creative stuff when you're slapping. I'm just wondering, sometimes I find in my own playing that maybe I'll learn a new technique or something. I kind of get stuck in a rut, just playing something that is really closely related to the technique. But I'm wondering, is there anything that you do besides, if you could break it down, maybe what you do to kind of get some of those really the great rhythms and the creative stuff you design for your instrument?
Well, I think the most important thing is to not be afraid of your imagination, because a lot of people are, and unfortunately, a lot of teachers kind of beat you down when you're young, because I know when I was young, I couldn't play the bass line straight. I was always trying to add something. That's what made it fun to me. And I remember the teachers always going, Marcus, man, you got to straighten it out, man, And it was probably because the ideas I had in my head weren't quite making it through the bass yet. And I think what happens to a lot of people, because other band members or other people start discouraging them, that they start to not trust their imagination. And, your imagination really as a musician is all you really have. That's your most valuable asset. After you learn how to make the sound out of your acts, it's just what can you think of, And it comes from joy, It comes from like, Poogie, man, doesn't this make you laugh? Or doesn't, man, remember this from back in the day? It's all really just about the same way we talk. That's how you should be playing, And if you're playing the same thing all the time, do you say the same thing all the time? And if you do, you're going to get pretty bored. And I think you have to think of music as a language and communication, but not just as the words that you read. Think about really, man, what would make you laugh, or what would make you even cry, what you feel, And it's just about saying, I'm not afraid of that, Wayne Shorter said to me, man, it's all about imagination, And, when you have a conversation with Wayne, and then you hear those songs, it all makes sense. It's the same guy, And what your playing should do is it should tell people about who you are. If you meet these great players, you're usually not surprised by the person. If you've been listening to their music for a long time, man, you sound just like you play, because that's what you should be doing. So it's just about freeing yourself and finding musical situations where you can just do your thing without worrying about getting beat down, because getting beat down is the worst thing. I see it happening. My kid, he's 13 now. He's playing piano, and the teacher's just wearing him out. And my job is to take him home and say, look, learn everything she has to offer, but don't let it defeat your spirit, because I think a lot of musicians, their spirit gets beat down from the process. So it's just really more than technique. It's more just about going, man, I'm so fortunate to be up here playing this instrument, and I'm going to make Poogie laugh. It's the last thing I do, It's got to be that kind of thing,